So right there, you said is a very common mistake.
What is common mistake is just asking what we assume it is. So many people, when putting the question, they would just ask how easy it is to add chips. But in this question, we already assuming that it's easy and we are asking how easy. But to not do that, to not put the bias into the question itself, we need to always mention both easy or difficult, visible, not visible, affordable, not affordable. Like opposite should be very straightforward in the beginning, so we are not leading them to any assumptions that we have.
Hey folks, welcome to Sneak Peek. And today I have with me Sofia, who's a phenomenal researcher working at Delivery Hero, and she's going to show us how a research study is created and how she tests those designs that our design team is creating in Lysnna. So super excited about this. Real quick, Sofia, there's so many different research tools out there for designers and researchers that are still figuring out what tool to use for research. What would you tell them why to use Lysnna?
Oh, it's a good question. We also tried different tools like Maze as well, and we still have access to different tools, but currently we use Lysnna because it gives us the best variation of tests, of methods that you can use in this tool. And also, I would say one of the big benefit, especially for us, is their panel, because we can recruit their own users and we can also filter them to our own needs. And it gives us a lot of speed in this test, in launching those tests, because otherwise the process is pretty long because of privacy, GDPR things. But here you just click and sometimes in 5 minutes you already have results from all over the world, from users or from participants from different countries.
Got it. Now, how does, I'm probably sure the designer or researcher doesn't just directly start testing, prototypes in Lysnna. What is the process before that to get to the stage where you can start testing the prototypes in Lysnna?
Yes, of course, it's not like we jump to Lysnna and we try to build something there, but there's the whole process. There are some team discussions. Mostly, if it's a evaluative project, which is Lysnna related, designers would be the owners of it, because mostly the scope is pretty small and more usability related, because it's a tool for testing the designs. That's how we use it. But here we are researchers to help designers as well with scoping the project, with setting up the project, with recruitment, and then even with analysis. And how we start? Basically, we ask the main questions in the template that we have as a starting point. So we have a template where designer usually needs to put their background about this particular scope. And what is super important to start is with user problem, what we already know, why we bring this solution to testing, what we are trying to impact with this solution or solutions, because often it's different variations of particular solution. Then we also ask them to fill research questions. So basically, what are we trying to learn and what hypotheses or risks do we have that we want to test? Because that's very important to understand in the very beginning. Otherwise, we might see we don't need the test or we need another methodology for this type of hypothesis or risks or questions. So this is a very important initial step to fill. And then, based on all of this, research questions, hypothesis, background, we put the details, like how do we actually start, how do we put it into the questions and the tests. So we ideate on methodology, like what type of test. It's like navigation test, preference test, or any other. We put it here as a draft and we see what are the questions we can ask. And then we go to Lysnna to actually see how it looks like when we define the particular method and study design, basically, what questions we ask, what metrics we measure. Then we go to Lysnna to build it.
Okay. How do you build this in Lysnna?
So I can show you one example of actual project that was done. So we defined with the designer together user problem. We defined what business goals and UX metrics we are gonna measure. What are the questions? There were new designs for one deal variation, and we wanted to know if it's improving usability, if it's clear, or is it intrusive or not. So pretty straightforward, just that elements is questions that we can measure. And based on that, we defined that it's going to be evaluative test with interactive prototype because the deal navigation is interactive. And we also put different hypotheses for us to see if it's, for example, we thought that maybe scrolling is more interruptive and intrusive and things like that. So after we put the test flow here in draft, so we created a task that we want to use and then follow-up questions that is usually following any tasks because we want to know some reasons and we want to compare designs. So in this case, it would be a question on how easy or difficult was it to complete and some statements. And those were different variations. We had some more like MVP versions, some are more well-developed versions. And it's a variation of the deal mechanism that we know our users struggle with from previous data. It can be from data, from research, that we know, or from expertise. Yeah.
Got it.
That's after we defined that, we went to Lysnna. And you can see it here. I'm gonna open the project. I'm gonna go to build section carefully. So in this view, after we define all of our goals, background, what we want, we put it usually designer. So us doesn't matter. It's very easy to put it in Lysnna. So first, of course, it's a language, and also it's important for device because in our case, prototype was mobile. It's important to put it's mobile only, and also afterwards we test it on mobile. Also, it's very important step as well. Then, if needed, we put some screener, but in this case, usability-related questions are usually, the thing is that for usability question, any type of user from anywhere of the world should be able to understand this feature. That's why we didn't put additional target audience. Of course, sometimes some more specific target audience can be here and you can ask some question. This one should be understandable for everyone.
Oh, wow. So the screener, if you enable it, like, I don't want you to change it, but if you enable it, it will let you select like which geographies and stuff.
It's not for geography yet. It's more for questions that you want to ask here. So
Okay.
sometimes we can ask if they have some subscription, if they use some competitors or whatever, which is a bit more specific. Yeah, and then we can qualify or disqualify based on this question. Yeah, in this case, it's not enabled. So then we put the prototype test that we defined before. That would be the task that we want to give to our users to perform, because one of our goals is to evaluate ease of use and usability of the feature, if it's understandable. And we cannot just ask how easy or difficult it is. We want them to actually try to use it and then evaluate. And both parts are important. So it's a little bit less biased. So in this case, we need to think about the scenario, which we put in this section of instructions. In our case, it's pretty straightforward. Imagine you want to order potato chips of various flavors for your friends. How would you do it in the most affordable way? Important thing for putting the tasks is that it should be straightforward and short. Of course, sometimes context is also important to give. So sometimes we actually can do it in the welcome screen to say you're gonna see this and that, imagine things like that. Here we were pretty straightforward. This is a task. Please show us how would you do it. Then we put the link here. I think it's also pretty simple, just putting the Figma link. Also the size is important. And we put here interactive prototype. We also created the end screen ourselves in the prototype because Lysnna doesn't understand. We want to finish this task, right? So we created it also as part of the prototype. Then, so yeah, basically it is just like that. We have a scenario of the task, then we have prototype. For that stage, actually it looks easy, but it's not that easy, especially if the prototype is very interactive. We have different flows, scenarios. We try to think if it's understandable. We test it a million times. We adjust different things. Yeah, so the main thing here is testing it with a preview. So you save and preview, and you see is it actually understandable. And also we do this, how we call like pilot testing. So it can be a friend or colleague in the office, like just giving them and seeing if it's understandable what we actually ask. And if it's evaluating what we want. So we don't launch like right away, we test it ourselves, and also we ask someone around who is not involved into the project, who doesn't know the context. at this stage. So at the end, we are sure that everyone from participants will understand also the same type of thing. It's very important also to see how it performs on different type of phones like iOS, Android, because also prototype sometimes need to be adjusted and things like that. Then we just put follow-up questions. Here we also put it as required. So because we want a complete sample to answer all of our questions. Here it's important to ask not in a leading way, so we don't ask just how easy it is to do something, meaning that it's probably easy, but we ask both how easy or difficult. It's a very common mistake, I would say, in terms of how we formulate questions.
So right there, you said is a very common mistake. So basically, instead of just asking was it easy or hard, you're giving users a scale.
Yeah, we give a scale. What is common mistake is just asking what we assume it is. So many people, when putting the question, they would just ask how easy it is to add chips. But in this question, we already assuming that it's easy and we are asking how easy. But to not do that, to not put the bias into the question itself, we need to always mention both easy or difficult, visible, not visible, affordable, not affordable. Like opposite should be very straightforward in the beginning. So we are not leading them to any assumptions that we have. Yeah, so this is where we need to be careful how we put the follow-up questions. So we avoid the biases that is common for our questions. Then here we actually have logic. So based on their scores that they give from this question, which is from 1 to 7, we can ask them in open question, which is also helpful for us to understand some particular reasons, what made it easy for you or what made it difficult for you or what could be improved. And there's a short text.
Oh, wow. What happens? Can you change the logic? Like, what does that logic screen look like? Oh my God. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's show or hide some question. It can be based on prototype test result or can be on this
Wow.
question. And then you just choose what is the answer there, which is very straightforward, super useful as well. I don't know if I can close it. I think. Yeah, so basically that's where it is also helpful. Then after that, we had another question about the designs because we had one assumption that this interaction can be interruptive. So we wanted to evaluate it as well between different variations. That's why we gave them just a design survey, which is just showing a screen and asking. So they already interacted. They know the context of this screen because they did the task before. Then we ask how visually disruptive or seamless it was for them again on this scale, because it was one of our hypotheses and risks that we saw with this particular design. And then we had preference test, which is a little bit more optional, but it can give sometimes something unexpected reasons of preference of one or another variation, which is can be considered for the future improvement of the feature. Because for preference test, it's also tricky. We don't want just to ask users what they prefer, because when we ask like that, it is never true. They cannot project what they prefer because it's actual behavior. That's why it's important to first observe with a task how they actually perform the task with this design, if it's easy, if they can achieve the task that we want. And then at the very end, we ask them about the preference and we consider it as additional. We are not making decision just on the preference, but we consider it as additional input, what can be improved and what is like more visual preference for users.
Got it.
So that's all. We've had only one task, one question, and preference test. And I can show how it looked in the preview.
Oh, yeah. I love this.
Normally, we would test the preview in the phone because that's how actual participants would see it. So here there are some instructions already and the tasks that we put, highlighting some important things. Then participant would see the prototype on their phone and they want to order potato chips. For that, they probably need to scroll, find potato chips because it's most affordable way with a discount. And because they have various flavors, they can use this discount. And then go to the cart. So it's, yeah, they had to choose all of them. Go to cart. And then task completed. So if they found these various chips in the most affordable way, which was only way within this deal, task is completed. Then we ask them how easy or difficult was it to add chips. And then you remember that we have logic. So because I gave 5, they ask why it is difficult. We can say because I couldn't scroll or I couldn't understand. Then the question would be how visually disruptive or seamless do you find the screen? So overall screen. Even for we are focusing on this element, we want to ask about the whole screen because this element is part of overall experience. Then we give some score, and then there is a preference test when in random order we give other variations as well. In the phone it looks a bit different. You only see one, you zoom one and then you scroll. Here you have too many to assess, but yeah, you basically choose, you put the reason why you choose this one, and then you continue. That's all. And that's how we do the preview on mobile phone instead of the web for this particular test, but that's how it looks like. After that, we go to recruitment. In this case, as I mentioned, the big benefit of Lysnna is that they have their own panel across different countries, and it's pretty big and accessible. That's why we usually go here to find participants. Here we set up the sample size, number of participants. Usually we start from 2030. I think it is also very easy to do. Here researchers usually help because we are also in control of target audience. We want to also control the budget that we spend here. And we know like for different type of tests, what type of sample we would prefer. And here we can also choose location, which is for us usually the case. We need to put the mix of different countries that we operate in. Yes, and you can see the price right away, and you can also choose some other additional criteria of participants. In our case, we can do it for shopping. So grocery products, for example, or food delivery also. They, I think, have some food delivery here. They also have, so you can choose frequency of using food delivery. As I mentioned, for this usability type of test, we usually try to be more generic because at the end, everyone should find it usable. But if there are some particular element that is only for particular segment of users, it's very useful to have this possibility. For example, to ask those users who never use food delivery how they find something which is completely new for them. It would be great also to see if we have some assumptions or some business goals for this particular audience. Yeah, so that's how recruitment goes. And then we launch the test. It depends on the markets. It takes often like some minutes, sometimes hours to complete, depends, as I said, on the criteria that we selected, but mostly very fast. And in our case here, we can see the results. So we can see how was the task completion. We can also see first clicks on, if we click here, clicks, then we can see.
So is this like the heat map, or what is this technical word for it? Like seeing where the user has clicked and everything?
Yeah, so there's heat map. Oh, sorry, it's very long. Or just clicks that we use for analysis for particular. So we want to see first clicks sometimes, like this one. So it was first intention. And then we can see all clicks and we can understand what were the like overall process.
Let me ask you a question. Which is more important, clicks or heat maps?
As it doesn't matter, I think. I mean, sometimes clicks is more useful to calculate, but like amount of clicks for comparison, especially first click. When the metric is first click, it's more straightforward. But to visualize where users go and click on the prototype, I think both work pretty similar.
But yeah, I think I just figured out that as a designer, I think I should focus more on the first click or clicks in general rather than heat maps in terms of takeaways.
Yeah, first click is a very good metric because it's a first intention. And if you had assumptions about first intention, it would be really useful. But if your assumption is not related to the first click or like first intention, but the task maybe is more complex, that users need more clicks, then you can just take into account the whole heat map and see how was the whole flow and pass rather than actual click. So it depends on your task and on your goals of the research, what you want to measure. In this case, we wanted to see first click because it was possible with a prototype to succeed from the first click when you click on the deal. That's why it was important metric for us. But for some tests, it might be not important. Depends on how you set up your tests.
Got it.
But yeah, they overall have also what is good for additional metrics to see is average time spent, because we had different design variations. We can compare the average and we can also see misclicks. But there's a bit of limitation because it's only for this pass. Actually, it is a limitation of Lysnna. You can see this metrics only for passes that users took. And if the prototype is a bit more complex with different flows, as we also had, it is harder to summarize it because here we have 2 passes, but sometimes can be more passes and you need to go to each one. And usually what we do it in a spreadsheet. We basically put the metrics and we calculate everything in the spreadsheet. We don't rely just on this dashboard to be more accurate. Also, sometimes as a first step, it's important to see overall results of participants to see if there are some outliers. For example, we can see maybe some participant just did everything in 20 seconds and it's not sensible, their answers, for example, or clicks. So in that case, we also need to keep in mind that this participant maybe was outlier or did it just for the compensation. And we also eliminate this type of participants or our sample is more solid. It's a first also step to check the quality and then start analysis. And often we do analysis additionally in the spreadsheet when we calculate different metrics for comparison. But not everything you need to do there. For example, this scale question is very easy to analyze. They have mean score here. And also what is really great for open text, they have this possibility to tag answers. And that's what helps. So you read all of the answers that you have, and then you tag them, and then you see the prominence of different topics that were mentioned. For example, this one, what was made it easy, then what was difficult, we have other type of things. Also, what is actually here, we can see that prototype is one of the reasons, and it's also good to keep in mind sometimes it's not actually your feature, but it's a limitation of the prototype that you have. And users also say it, like, I wasn't sure how to use this prototype.
Yeah.
And it's completely fine because you cannot completely imitate life experience. You just, when you analyze, you see that this issue is not related to the actual feature. It's related to the test setup and prototype, which we try to minimize as much as possible when we preview, when we test the test, but it still can happen. And we just keep it in mind when we analyze that some issues are not actual issues, it's prototype-related issues, and we just put them outside of our final recommendation.
Makes sense.
So that's how it looks. And then we go back. In this case, we put all of the detailed results, what made it easy, what made it difficult for each variation, what was the preference and reasons for the preference. This is like a little bit just copy-pasting and putting everything. So for the future, if somebody wants to go and see how some variation perform. But overall, what was the most helpful out of the whole test is to have a summary of metrics. So we have all 3 designs here and all of the metrics that we wanted to measure. So task completion, first click, time of completion, ease of use, seamless, and preference. And out of all of that, we could see what performed better, well, or better, worse, or maybe they even performed all similarly. Like it also can happen. They may perform all the same, which is also an insight. Actually, it's completely fine insight that for users, it doesn't make a difference which variation you choose. Maybe you thought one is super, super easy, another one is difficult. Actually, for users, they don't even notice the difference when they interact. It also can happen in our case. And then we go back, we look at our hypothesis that we had, and we can reject or confirm the hypothesis. In this case, actually, many designs performed more or less similar. And that's why, we get a recommendation on the most easy to build from development point of view, because for users, the performance would be the same, but for us, it would be less costly to build.
Got it.
That's how it works.
Thank you so much, Sofia, for showing us how you actually test designs in Lysnna.
You're welcome. Happy to share.
Hey, this is Jay. It means the world to me that you watch this video. If you want to unlock the AI design and growth design interviews with designers at some of the top companies in the world, then head on over to sneakpeek.design and subscribe to the newsletter.